Okay, so you want to own a nightclub. You picture the rope, the line stretching down the block. You picture the bass moving through the floor before you even step inside. You picture cash sliding across the bar faster than anyone can count it. You picture your name lit up over the door. You picture the room at capacity, every table reserved, every bottle sold before the doors even open. You picture the version of this business that shows up in movies. Glamorous, effortless, printing money under colored light. Sounds simple. It is not simple. Before the first guest walks in, you are already 6 figures deep. The number most owners see first sits between $240,000 and $840,000. In some markets, that ceiling climbs toward $2 million. That is not the ceiling. That is only the entry fee. It does not include the piece of paper that lets you sell a drink. Here is what nobody tells you outside the velvet rope. You are not paying for a room. You are paying for a machine, and the machine has parts you cannot see from the sidewalk. Sound and lighting alone can run $100,000 to $250,000. That is before a single speaker gets calibrated to the room. Every room has its own acoustics. Calibration is not optional, and it is not cheap. Sound systems by themselves can climb as high as $500,000 at the premium end. Lighting rigs sit on top of that as their own separate expense. Premium venues overall can blow straight past $2 million before opening night. $2 million, and you have not sold a single drink yet. One detailed build-out model puts total funding needs near $1.792 million. That covers construction plus a cash reserve for the first 90 days. Most owners budget for the construction. Far fewer budget for those first 90 days of cash reserve. That gap is where many new clubs quietly run into trouble. That figure breaks down into $300,000 for renovation and $200,000 for entertainment equipment. Add $150,000 for sound and $120,000 for furniture and decor. Add $100,000 more for lighting. Add a monthly lease running $5,000 to $20,000 for a high-traffic space. The meter is running before the paint dries. Rent does not wait for your grand opening. It starts the day you sign. Real estate alone can run $200,000 to $500,000 before a wall gets painted. Decor and VIP infrastructure, the booths, the bars, the dance floor itself can add $20,000 more. In some rooms, it climbs past $500,000. Security deposits alone on a commercial lease can run 2 to 3 months of rent. All of it is paid before you even hold the keys. Marketing for the launch adds another $30,000 to $70,000. That is just to fill a room nobody has heard of yet. You were never buying a room. You were buying a sound system with a bar bolted onto it. The building was just the crate it shipped in. Every dollar you spent before opening night went toward the machine, not the walls around it. The walls were the cheapest part of the whole operation, and nobody tells you that going in. Now here is the part that catches almost every new owner off guard. It is not the rent. It is not the sound system either. It is the piece of paper that lets you legally sell a drink at all. In quota markets like New Jersey, or in dense pockets of New York City, this changes. The license is not something you simply apply for, it is something you buy, secondhand, from someone who already holds one. In those high-demand zones, transfer values can climb well into 6 figures. That happens purely because the government has capped how many licenses can exist. It has nothing to do with the room, the concept, or the owner behind it. Scarcity alone sets the price. The base application fee itself might be only a few $1,000s, but an acquired license in a hot neighborhood can still cost 6 figures once scarcity gets priced in. The gap between the sticker price and the real price is the entire trap. Application fees alone run $1,000 to $10,000, depending on jurisdiction and license type. Some prospective owners try to shortcut the wait. They buy a property that used to hold a bar, hoping the history transfers with the deed. That path carries its own risk. Unpaid back taxes, unresolved code violations, old liens nobody disclosed at closing. Nothing about it is actually a shortcut. And the wait, even when a license is technically available, is brutal on its own terms. Investors do not like waiting 5 or 6 months for revenue to start. That pressure alone kills some deals before the room ever opens. Standard review in New York runs 22 to 26 weeks for most applications. That is nearly half a year of waiting. It stretches longer if a nearby competitor triggers a public hearing. Meanwhile, the rent keeps running. The staff you already hired keeps waiting on payroll. Every week of delay is a week of pure cost with zero revenue attached to it. Some owners burn through their entire opening year cushion before the license even arrives. Some cities require a hearing anytime 3 or more licenses already exist within 500 feet of each other. Fingerprinting, publication notices, and legal review each add hundreds more dollars on top. None of those fees are refundable if the application gets denied. Fire code compliance and occupancy limits add another layer of inspection before the city signs off. Failing any one of them can freeze the opening timeline indefinitely. Here is where it gets interesting. You can have the building finished, the sound calibrated, and the staff trained, and still be 5 months from legally selling a shot of vodka. Some operators bridge that gap the way Studio 54 once did. They run on temporary permits while the real license crawls through review. The permit was never paperwork sitting in a drawer. The permit was the actual product you were buying. The building just happened to be the container that held it. Everything else, the sound, the lighting, the design, was decoration wrapped around that single piece of paper. So once the license lands and the doors can legally open, where does the money actually come from? This is the part every owner assumes they already understand. Most of them are wrong about where the real money sits. The obvious layer is the cover charge, a few dollars ahead, and it barely moves the needle. It exists mostly to filter the crowd, not to fund the business. A club that relied on cover charges alone would close within a month. The pour is where the actual survival happens. The real engine sits behind the bar, inside the pour itself. That is where nearly all of the actual profit lives, night after night. Standard liquor markup runs 400 to 500%, the highest markup of anything the room sells. The average drink costs a bar $1 to $3 to make. That same drink sells for $12, $15, sometimes $20. Spirits get priced 4 to 5 times the wholesale cost of the bottle. That multiplier is standard across the industry, not a markup unique to any one club. Operators target a pour cost of just 15 to 25% of the sale price. Wine gets marked up 2.5 to 3 times wholesale. Cocktails routinely carry gross margins between 70 and 85%. Few other products in retail carry margins that wide. That is exactly why the bar, not the door, funds the entire operation. Beer follows a similar pattern, marked up 2 to 3 times wholesale. Food, merchandise, and coat check add a thin layer on top of all of it, rarely more than a rounding error next to what the bar brings in on a busy night. Read that again. You are selling something that costs $1 for $15, and the industry calls that normal. Then there is the layer that actually funds the room, bottle service. A single reserve table can out-earn an entire section of walk-in customers. One table versus a whole crowd. That comparison alone tells you where the real money in this business actually lives. You are not really selling liquor at that point. You are selling reserved real estate, with a bottle sitting on it as a formality. The bottle is the receipt. The table is the actual product. Promoters get paid a flat fee, or a cut of the door. Their job is filling those tables with the right crowd. A room can be full and still lose money if the wrong crowd fills it. The promoter's job is making sure that never happens. A busy night can generate $1,500 to $50,000. The average club pulls in $25,000 to $30,000 a month. You were never really selling drinks. You were selling square footage by the hour. The vodka was just the delivery fee. Everyone in the room thought they were buying a drink. They were actually renting a seat. But revenue was never the whole story, and this is where the room turns against the person who owns it. Every dollar that comes in the front door has already been promised to something else. Monthly operating costs run $30,000 to $100,000. Payroll, inventory, utilities, and insurance all stack on top of each other. Utilities alone run around $2,500 a month. That just keeps the sound, the lighting, and the air conditioning running. A quiet Tuesday and a packed Saturday cost roughly the same amount to keep lit and cooled. Insurance adds another layer. General liability runs $500 to $2,000 a year. Property coverage $1,000 to $10,000. Workers' compensation runs $2,000 to $10,000, depending on headcount. None of these numbers are optional. Skip any one of them, and the club cannot legally operate at all. None of that touches payroll for bartenders, security, promoters, and door staff, the single largest line item most owners underestimate. Security in particular scales with capacity, not with how busy the room actually is that night. A room licensed for 1,000 people needs security for 1,000 people. That holds true even on a slow Tuesday with 80 guests inside. A fully staffed weekend night can require a dozen or more people on the clock at once, each one a fixed cost. Whether the room fills up or stays half empty, financial planners recommend at least 6 months of operating runway before you even open the doors. Most first-time owners budget for opening night. Very few budget for the 6 quiet months that might follow it. Sales tax, payroll tax, and excise tax all sit quietly underneath the numbers on the receipt. None of them are visible to the guest holding the drink. All of them are very visible to the owner at the end of the month. Add it all up against the industry's average profit margin, and the number that comes back is 5%. Here is where it gets interesting. 5% means something specific. After the liquor markup, after the bottle service premium, after every clever revenue layer, you keep 5 cents of every dollar. The revenue was never the story. A 5% margin means the bleed underneath it was. The number on the receipt and the number in the owner's pocket are two very different stories. And the bleed has a shape, and the shape is designed, not accidental. It shows up the same way in market after market, city after city. A nightclub's fixed costs run every day of the month whether anyone shows up or not. Rent does not pause on a Tuesday. Staff still need to be paid on a slow Wednesday. But the real income concentrates into 2 or 3 nights a week. Everything else is quiet, expensive overhead pretending to be a business day. That mismatch is the trap itself, and it is not misfortune. It is the business model, working exactly as designed, just not in the owner's favor. Nobody built it maliciously. It just was never built to protect the person signing the lease. This is legal. This is normal. Layer onto that a trend cycle that fully rotates every 12 to 24 months. That rotation has nothing to do with quality. A great room can lose its crowd purely because the crowd moved on. A new crowd, a new sound, a newer room down the street. None of it is personal. It is simply how the industry resets itself. You get a business with an expiration date built in before opening night. And here is the trap. 60% of nightclubs fail within their first year. That is not a warning from a skeptic. That is the baseline, industry-wide. By some counts, the failure rate climbs to 75%, even 90% in the toughest markets. Over 70% of new nightlife venues do not survive past the 24-month mark. The average lifespan of a nightlife venue typically does not surpass 2 years. 2 years to build a name, a following, a reputation, and then watch the clock run out anyway. Compare that to restaurants overall, where roughly 1 in 3 businesses fails. The nightclub number looks even more brutal by comparison. A restaurant owner who fails is unlucky. A nightclub owner who succeeds is the exception. Across the country, an estimated 62,600 bars and nightclubs exist. They all compete for the same finite Friday and Saturday nights. Most owners underestimate their own burn rate and overestimate how quickly revenue arrives. That combination quietly drains the reserve meant to carry the business through its slowest stretch. By the time the mistake becomes obvious, the reserve is already gone. Weather can swing it. A new venue 2 blocks away can swing it. A single viral complaint can swing a week's income by thousands of dollars. There is almost no slack built into the model to absorb it. A single fire code violation or a noise complaint that triggers a suspension can be enough. It can push an already thin margin into the red for the month. It was never a business that suffered bad luck one season. It was a business built to run out of relevance on a clock nobody printed on the lease. Owners rarely see that clock ticking from inside the room. A packed Saturday feels the same in month 3 as it does in month 30. There is no alarm that goes off when the trend starts to turn, right up until the crowd simply stops coming back. To understand why the room itself became the product, go back to 1977, a former opera house on West 54th Street in Manhattan. 2 men named Steve Rubell and Ian Schrager. They saw an opportunity in the growing popularity of nightclubs. They saw it in the emergence of disco culture too. 2 very different forces, arriving in New York at exactly the same moment. They took that building, once a CBS television studio, and turned it into Studio 54 in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, start to finish, for one of the most famous rooms in nightlife history. The investment was a modest $400,000. Their design team included architect Scott Bromley and sound designer Richard Long. Long also built the sound system for the legendary Paradise Garage, a room with its own devoted following. Rubell and Schrager had been inspired by an earlier gay nightclub called Le Jardin. It had already blurred the line between gay, bisexual, and straight nightlife in Manhattan. They did not have a liquor license for the entire first year. Instead, they ran on a rolling stack of one-day catering permits, while the real license crawled through approval. Proof that a room could print money long before the paperwork caught up. Their biggest single night grossed $190,000 on New Year's Eve, 1978. The room held roughly 2,000 people, but the real invention that night was not the sound system. It was not the lighting rig everyone remembers. It was the rope, a simple length of velvet strung across a doorway. It quietly turned rejection itself into the product being sold. Rubell would stand at that rope and decide, out loud, who existed inside for the night and who did not. Someone might get rejected for wearing the wrong hat. Someone else might get waved through for no clear reason at all. That randomness was the point. Nobody outside the rope could ever predict the formula, because there was no real formula at all. 40 years later, Schrager admitted he regretted inventing it. He said he was surprised nobody had come up with something better in 4 decades. That admission says something. The most imitated idea in nightlife history came from a man who wished he had never built it. Read that again. The rope was never about safety, or crowd control, or exclusivity for its own sake. It was a scarcity engine disguised as culture. It is still the core pricing tool of the entire nightclub industry today. Every bottle service table is Rubel's velvet rope wearing a different costume. So is every locked guest list. Every "we are at capacity" at a half-empty room. Rubel and Schrager were arrested for tax evasion in 1979. The club closed for good in February of 1980, only 33 months after opening night. Cover charges at the peak reportedly ran as high as $25 a head. The rope itself outlived the room it was invented for by decades. It outlived both of the men who invented it. It is still working the door tonight, somewhere, under a different name. Which brings us to how these businesses actually die. And the death is rarely one bad night at the door. It is a slow accumulation of debt that a busy room quietly disguises as health. A packed dance floor and a solvent business are not the same thing. The room can look thriving right up until the moment it is not. Take Avant Gardner, the parent company behind Brooklyn Mirage, once one of the most celebrated nightclub venues in the country. Its dance floor hosted some of the biggest names in electronic music. Its lines wrapped around the block on the busiest nights. Here is where it gets interesting. Over several years, the company ran up debts north of $155 million. This happened even while the venue stayed packed most weekends. The club was pulled from operation after failing to meet an annual safety inspection deadline. A single missed deadline shut down one of the country's biggest dance floors. Its chief executive was fired amid allegations of mismanagement and fraud. Creditors publicly called for an outside trustee to take control. When the people owed money stopped trusting management, that alone tells you the story is already over. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in Delaware. Unsecured creditors were ultimately paid $3.3 million as part of a settlement. That cleared the way for the business to be sold. $3.3 million sounds substantial until you set it against $155 million in total debt. An earlier version of the reorganization plan had already collapsed after creditors argued the proposed sale undervalued the business. A Delaware bankruptcy judge eventually approved a wind-down plan, handing the venue's remaining assets to a different nightclub operator entirely. The name on the marquee may survive. The company that built it did not. And then came the final number, the one that turns a financial story into a physical one. A demolition permit was filed to tear the 32,000 square foot space down completely, down to nothing. No stage, no dance floor, no rope at the door. The estimated cost of demolition alone, more than $1.5 million. Read that again. A room built for legendary nights ended as a line item in a bankruptcy filing. One of the most famous nightclubs in the country did not die from empty nights. It died from $155 million of good ones, and they still were not enough. Brooklyn Mirage was not killed by bad luck, or a bad season, or a single scandal. It was killed by scale. The same 5% margin problem every small club faces, just multiplied until the number became unsurvivable. So, walk back through what you actually bought. None of it was what it looked like from outside the rope. Every layer of this business was wearing a costume. It is time to take the costume off, one piece at a time. You did not buy a building. You bought a container for a liquor license. It took 5 months to arrive and could cost 6 figures on its own. The building was never the point of any of it. You did not buy a bar. You bought a 400% markup machine wrapped in ambiance. It sells $1 liquor for $15 a pour and calls the difference atmosphere. The lighting, the music, the crowd noise, all of it exists to make that markup feel invisible. You did not buy square footage. You bought reserved real estate that only mattered 2 or 3 nights a week. Those nights financed the other 5, which sat there as dead weight. A room this expensive cannot afford to be quiet even 1 night out of 7. You did not buy exclusivity. You bought Ian Schrager's 40-year-old invention, a rope that manufactures scarcity out of a room. That room has barely better than a coin flip's chance of surviving its first year. The scarcity was manufactured. The risk underneath it was real. You did not buy a crowd. You bought a promoter economy. People paid to fill your tables with strangers who trust the promoter more than they trust the room. Take the promoter away, and the tables can empty out overnight. You did not buy a career. You bought a 2-year window before the trend cycle moves on. The clock started the moment you opened the doors. Whether you noticed it or not, everything you thought you were purchasing on opening night was really just packaging. It was wrapped around a license, a margin, and a countdown clock. Look at Brooklyn Mirage, $155 million in debt, sitting underneath one of the most celebrated dance floors in the country. Fame did not save it. A packed room did not save it either. Scale never actually fixes this problem. Scale just makes the collapse louder and the demolition bill bigger. Louder collapse, bigger bill. Same broken math underneath both. The same 5% margin that strangles a $240,000 neighborhood room was still there. It sat underneath a venue that once grossed tens of millions a year. The mechanism does not care how famous the address becomes. It did not spare Studio 54. It did not spare Brooklyn Mirage. It will not spare the room you are picturing right now. You didn't buy a nightclub. You bought a liquor license wearing a building, was rented out by the hour, with a 2-year clock built into the lease. The room was never the asset. The license was. Picture the rope one more time. It was never guarding a party. It was guarding a permit.